Hey everyone, welcome back to Infinite Podcast. I'm your host, and alongside me is Simon. Today we're diving into the gritty topic of police defunding. It's a hot one with folks claiming it either boosts community programs or risks public safety. So let's chew on that data and see what's up. Simon, some states are trying this out, switching funds around. What's going down on the streets there?
Oh, Joe, this is spicy. You've got states trimming the fat off police budgets like it's a holiday ham. They're tossing those dollars into community programs, hoping to bake a better society pie. But let's be real. Do you see Mr. Thief stopping and thinking, maybe I won't swipe this TV because they funded a new basketball court? Crime stats are all over the place, like a toddler's crayon masterpiece. Some spots get safer, some don't. It's a real grab bag.
Heh, a holiday ham, you say? Well, I doubt we can sugarcoat this bitter pill. If crime stats are crayons, then surely there's a pattern to the madness. Not all community programs are slam dunks, and a shiny new court won't stop all the fouls. It seems we're in a complex mix of social issues and policing. There's no one-size-fits-all answer here. And hey, isn't the real question whether these initiatives are a full court press or just shooting airballs?
For sure, Joe. It's like telling someone to fix a leaky faucet with duct tape. It might hold for a bit, but you're not dealing with the plumbing issue. You know, in places where they've defunded without a solid game plan, it's like watching a dog chase its tail, going nowhere fast. Picture this. Fewer cops can mean slower response times, and that's a fact. Bad guys aren't shaking in their boots because someone funded an art class. They see opportunity. Even though community programs are great, sometimes what you need is a good old wrench to tighten those bolts.
True, a good wrench. Let's not forget the importance of a swift response when needed. It's one thing to beautify the neighborhood with murals, but if someone's breaking into your house, you're not going to be admiring the street art. You'll want those blue lights flashing pronto. Stats do indeed show that in some defunded areas, crime ticked up. You remove cops from the equation, and it can be an open invite for trouble. We've got to strike that balance between proactive community support and reactive law enforcement.
Absolutely, Joe. And here's the kicker. It's not about just slashing and burning budgets. What really grinds my gears is when they slash without a strategic backup plan. You've got to have teams ready to swoop in with something other than handcuffs, like mental health support, housing aid, or job training. Cops are often the Band-Aid for deeper societal issues. Strip away that Band-Aid without proper care, you're asking for an infection. We need to sprinkle some common sense on this whole defunding chili. Mix it right, or else we'll all end up with indigestion.
You're not wrong about the Band-Aid, Simon. Straight talk. A cop isn't a shrink or a social worker. Reallocating funds? Fine, but do it with precision, like a surgeon, not a lumberjack. Mental health crises shouldn't default to police intervention. We need specialists for that. But let's not pretend a quick shuffle of bucks will cure decades of systemic issues overnight. Defunding without direction is like yanking out the GPS mid-road trip and thinking you'll still get to Grandma's house on time. Good luck.
No dice, Joe. Imagine you're playing darts, blindfolded, thinking each throw's hitting bullseye because you're hearing a thud. Spoiler, it's not the board, buddy. It's your grandma's antique vase. That's defunding with no strategy. Tossing money at community programs willy-nilly won't snuff out crime on its own. It's like putting a cat in charge of the goldfish bowl and then wondering why you're down one fish. We can't pat ourselves on the back because we funded some feel-good projects. Crime rates might dip or spike, but are we actually fixing the leak or just turning off the tap and calling it a day? I think it's more about recalibration than defunding. Keep the peace, sure, but let's bring in the specialists where they count.
Hey there, fresh listeners. Just tuning in? You're catching us mid-debate on the sticky issue of police defunding. Bottom line, it's not as simple as just divvying up dollars. We've been talking about how slashing police budgets without a plan can be like going on a road trip with no map. Sure, we're all for adding funds to community programs, mental health, housing, job training, but don't think that alone is the golden ticket. It might help, or it might just be a very expensive Band-Aid. Stay with us as we keep unpacking this puzzle piece by piece.
Oh, this takes me back to the time my car broke down in the middle of nowhere. Classic. I had zero tools with me. I was clearly not prepared. Just sat there waiting for a random act of kindness. Hours tick by, right? Along comes this guy on a bike. Not a mechanic, but he's got duct tape. Fixes up something temporary like. It gets me to the next town, but guess what? The problem's still there, lurking. That's like this whole defunding biz. It might look fixed from a distance. We're all cheering, "Yay, go duct tape!" But underneath, the engine's still a mess. You need the right tools and people who know how to use them. Like my car needed a real fix. Our communities need deep crafted solutions, not just a pat on the back and a roll of tape.
I see where you're coming from with the car story. Let's be honest here. Duct tape solutions in community safety? No go. Like your bike guy's quick fix, defunding without a proper strategy might get us rolling, but won't take us far. Real fixes need expert mechanics, or in our case, trained professionals for societal issues beyond what the police are equipped to handle. Security depends on layers, solid law enforcement for immediate dangers, and targeted programs for underlying problems. Cut through one layer without reinforcing the others, and you're riding on borrowed time. We shouldn't confuse short-term silencing of an issue with solving it.
Spot on, Joe. Mixing metaphors here. But are we then saying our communities are like houses in need of renovation? Where's the balance between keeping the foundation solid with good law enforcement and at the same time modernizing the place with these social programs? How do we make sure not to knock down crucial walls while we're adding nice new fixtures?
Renovation's a good word for it. Think about it. When you reno a house, you don't start swinging a sledgehammer without a blueprint. Same deal with our communities. The foundation of law enforcement is necessary, but so is modernizing with social programs that actually address why crimes happen in the first place. But let's not get it twisted. Just pumping money into programs isn't automatically productive. We got to measure results, like are we actually reducing crime, improving lives, or just throwing cash at problems and hoping they stick to the wall like spaghetti? Let's bring in the experts, assess the stats, and remodel wisely. Keep the walls supporting the roof while refreshing the interior. That's the balance we're aiming for here.
Yeah, so it's really about strategy, isn't it? If you're just plowing funds into community programs without tracking the outcomes, what's the point? It's like a chef dumping ingredients into a pot hoping to make gourmet soup. And the cash you take away from the boys in blue, the impact's got to be checked too. Let's say crime rates do dip when we start those shiny new community centers. Great, but is it because of that? Or did we just have a quiet month? Correlation isn't causation. Being scientific about this stuff matters. A bit of trial and error, sure, but always with one eye on the data. Otherwise, we're all lost at sea, hoping to bump into land by chance.
Hey, new listeners joining in. Welcome to Infinite Podcast. Here with Simon, we're slicing through the debate on defunding police and investing in community programs. Imagine fixing up a house. You need both a solid foundation, in this case good policing, and modern touches. These are our social initiatives. We're all about finding balance. It's no use tearing down walls without a plan. We've been hashing out how essential it is to measure outcomes of reallocating funds so we can really get to that gourmet soup of community safety, not just throw spaghetti at the wall. Stay tuned as we keep stirring the pot.
Wrapping this part up, Joe, it's like we're all sitting at a big dinner table, looking at the safety stew in front of us. Everyone's got a different idea of what ingredient to add next. But hey, remember folks, too many cooks can spoil the broth. So how do we make sure everyone gets a spoonful they're happy with? That's the million-dollar question. And if anyone claims they've got the perfect recipe, well, I'd take that with a pinch of salt. What's our next helping of topics look like?
You know, Simon, this reminds me of a bit of a conundrum that's been cooking lately. We've got folks rallying for police reform and others staunchly defending law enforcement. Like our dinner table example, everyone's taste buds are craving a different flavor. Curiously enough, surveys do show varying trust levels in the police across different communities. Now we have to chew on this. Is there a satisfying middle ground here? Can we season our safety stew with justice reform without losing the core police protection that some find so comforting? It also begs the question about the role of our elected officials. They're like head chefs here. What's their move to ensure the recipe they serve up meets ethical standards while hitting that sweet spot between reform and reliability in policing?
Joe, you gotta see the pickle we're in. It's like everyone's at a pizza party arguing over toppings. Trust in cops is scattered like cheese. Some places it's gooey and strong, other spots it's barely there. Folks craving reform are looking at the burnt crust, wondering if that slice is edible, while die-hard defenders of law enforcement are gobbling up the extra pepperoni without batting an eye. Middle ground? Ha! That's the elusive mushroom on this metaphorical pizza. And as for our elected chefs, their ethical duty is not tossing in ingredients willy-nilly to please the loudest in the room. They gotta make sure this whole pizza, toppings and all, is cooked through properly, so no one gets food poisoning from half-baked policies. Does that mean more spice or less? Depends on who you ask, but man, they can't just stick with the same old recipe.
Absolutely, Simon. Tell you what, it's like we're looking at a half pepperoni, half plain pizza, and our elected chefs keep reaching for the pineapple. Nobody ordered pineapple. It seems they're trying to invent a new flavor when all we asked for was a slice that doesn't give us indigestion. Now that's food for thought. Speaking of mixing things up, let's pivot to something lighter. Ever notice how every action movie seems to have the same retired spy coming back for one last job?
Sorry to sidestep the spies, Joe, but that whole trust issue with law enforcement is still buzzing in my head. I mean, think about it. You're living in a neighborhood where the cops are like local celebrities. Everybody loves them. But then somewhere else, people see a blue uniform, and it's panic mode. Finding that middle ground between reforming the force and keeping communities safe ain't easy. It's kind of boggling why some areas have bake sales for their precincts, while others can't dial 911 fast enough. Makes you wonder if there's something more than just good cop, bad cop going on here. If we're playing hot potato with community trust and safety, how long before we all get burned? And these elected chefs, stirring the pot, they've got a responsibility to taste test every spoonful of change before serving it up to us.
It's a real head-scratcher, isn't it? So touching on that contrast you just painted, why do you think trust in law enforcement varies so wildly from one neighborhood to the next? What's cooking beneath the surface there?
It's a mishmash of ingredients, Joe. Let's lay it out. History's got its fingerprints all over the kitchen. Some communities have had a rough go with police, leaving a bad taste from get-go. You've got places where people see cops as protectors, then others as oppressors due to past encounters. These experiences get passed down like grandma's controversial meatloaf recipe. Some folks love it, others can't stomach it. Add to that socioeconomic factors. Neighborhoods with more money often receive a different brand of policing versus underfunded areas where tensions might run high. Now throw in media's spice rack. They're dishing out stories that can season perceptions in all sorts of ways. Trust isn't just mysteriously appearing or vanishing. It's homegrown in these local gardens, fed by roots that go deep and spread wide.
Absolutely, Simon. Break it down further and you'll find that training, accountability, community involvement, all these are key herbs in the stew of trust for law enforcement. For instance, areas where cops get training not just in firearms, but in de-escalation techniques, mental health awareness, or cultural sensitivity, that matters. Let's not forget transparency. The more open the communication between police and people, the less room for suspicion to fester. And hey, what about representation? Departments that reflect the communities they serve tend to simmer better on this whole trust thing. These factors can make or break whether residents view officers as part of the neighborhood family or as strangers crashing the block party.
But wait a sec, Joe. Training and transparency, sure, they're great. But let's not kid ourselves thinking that's the golden ticket. Sometimes you've got officers trained up to their eyeballs in every technique you can name, wearing body cams, hosting town halls, and still, trust is about as thin as cheap toilet paper. Think about it. Just because an officer knows how to handle a situation doesn't mean they will when the chips are down. And representation? Yeah, it helps, but sticking a familiar face in a uniform isn't automatically going to scrub away years of grime built up on the old trust pipes. Also, let's talk community involvement. That's like saying eating healthy is good for you. No duh, but if the local grocery store only stocks soda and chips, what then? What happens when these well-intentioned policies hit the ground where there might be no solid ground, just years of quicksand mistrust? It's complex, like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube while riding a unicycle.
Interesting point. Well, if we view community trust as a complex puzzle, it begs the question, can you really solve it while everyone's juggling their own pieces? Or is it time for a whole new game? Let's chew on that.
So Joe, this one time I'm visiting my cousin in a small town. Picture white picket fences, everyone waves. Cops there, part of the furniture. One officer, Frank, even coaches Little League. But here's where it gets juicy. I get pulled over for a taillight out. Expecting the worst, right? Nah. Officer McGillicuddy lets me off with advice on where to get the best donut in town. Now, back home in my big city, whole other vibe. You'd think your taillight was a signal flare for trouble. And there's Officer Not So Friendly, ready to write up your life story with tickets. It just hit me, you know? The place shapes the policing and vice versa. That's the puzzle, like seeing two radically different pictures made from the same box of pieces. It kind of makes you wonder what it takes to build trust universally, or if that whole new game isn't such a bad idea after all.
That's wild, man. It's definitely a tale of two cities. You've got Officer Friendly in one town where everyone knows his name, and then, like you said, in the big city, it's an alien world. That small-town cop probably can't imagine writing a ticket for something as petty as a busted taillight, but it's all about the ecosystem, right? In smaller towns, the connection is personal. They're protecting their own streets, like Frank coaching Little League. But in a metropolis, feels like officers are up against a sea of strangers daily. The system's just kind of depersonalized. So here's the Joe Rogan take. Maybe the focus should be less about building trust universally, which seems like a Herculean task, and more about fostering those small-town vibes even in the big city beats. Make that real human connection possible everywhere, not just in Mayberry.
You nailed it, Joe. Small-town vibes in a concrete jungle? That's like trying to plant an apple tree in the desert. Sure, it sounds insane, but isn't that what we're all about here? Taking on the impossible. Here's the kicker. What if these big city precincts took some Mayberry lessons and sprinkled them across their patrols? Imagine a world where the name Officer Friendly isn't just a fairy tale from over the hills. Could stitching that small-town fabric into our vast urban tapestries be the start of real change? Makes you wonder, what kind of needle and thread would we even need for that?
Imagine the town's number cruncher pulling out a pie chart, and instead of percentages, it's just pictures of actual pies to show where all the money's going. Now that'll get everyone talking, and laughing too.
Oh yeah, Joe, picture it. You've got the chief of police asking for a bigger slice of the budget pie, let's say apple pie for squad cars. Then a council member suggests maybe they just need mini pies. After all, aren't those Segways or electric scooters enough to chase down perps? Next, an activist stands up and says, hold on, why not use those funds for blueberry pies, community programs, I mean? Crowds chuckling, because who doesn't love blueberries? Even better if they help keep kids out of trouble. And you can't forget that one local guy, always at these meetings, who chimes in about how no one's considering the gluten-free options. It eases everyone into the real talk. Where's the cash best served? Keeps the heavy stuff a tad lighter, with a dusting of humor on top.
Ha, you've got that right, Simon. And in the spirit of keeping things light, did you hear about the police department's budget proposal for a new high-tech fleet? They were all set to swap patrol cars for unicycles. Just imagine the response times. Sir, we'll be there in 4 to 6 hours, depending on hills and wind resistance. It's all fun and games until you're in the slowest chase down Main Street.
But hold your horses, Joe. Unicycles could be their secret weapon. Think about it. High-speed chases now turn into wobbly sprints with honking clown noses for sirens. It's ridiculous, sure, But imagine if that's what all those budget meetings boiled down to: hilarious yet oddly sensible solutions. Plus, you've got to admit, seeing Officer Bigfoot balanced on one wheel might just be the thing to simmer down a tense city council standoff. Laughter can cut through tension like a hot knife through butter, and after everyone's had a good giggle, maybe then they'd notice all the other stuff that's been crammed into the budget, like funding for psychic detectives or espresso machines at every desk. Suddenly, those unicycles aren't looking too shabby.
For sure, Simon. So about those psychic detectives in the budget, do you think they'd have foreseen us cracking up over unicycle patrols?
Man, psychic detectives? They're probably out there predicting joke punchlines before we even say them. Can you imagine that debrief? Chief, I already know who's guilty, but more importantly, I foresee a killer knock-knock joke at the next budget meeting.
Knock-knock jokes in a budget meeting? Now that's one way to get everyone to loosen their ties and lean in. Foreseeing the guilty party is one thing, but predicting humor in such a dry setting, now that's a special kind of clairvoyance.
Man, you ever sit through one of those budget meetings? It's like watching paint dry, but if the paint was also doing taxes. I say let's spice it up a bit. Maybe throw in every suggestion with a wink and finger guns. Imagine proposing, how about we fund 24/7 interpretive dance traffic directing? Wink, click, bam, but only during Mercury retrograde. Let's give them a budget meeting that Nostradamus wouldn't have seen coming.
While humor can be a stress reliever, gotta play the straight man here. We need serious discussions in budget meetings. The stats are stark. Mixing jokes with figures can muddy clear financial decisions. Say interpretive dance for traffic directing. Funny, but imagine gridlocks. LA spends about $19 billion yearly on traffic management. No room for jest when safety's on the line. It's vital that we prioritize efficiency and public welfare over comedic relief in these scenarios.
I get you, Joe. Straight talk is key when making the big calls. But hey, everyone needs a laugh, even if it's just to break up the gridlock of those endless numbers talks. The idea isn't to turn real issues into a circus act, but to add a bit of lightheartedness where we can. After all, would a smile here and there really bankrupt the budget? Now, passing that burst of joy around, there's a line item I'd love to see debated. What's next on our fiscal funnies list?
Hey Simon, all this budget banter actually circles around to something more serious. Let's say budgets get slashed, as it's happening in some cities with the whole defunding debate. Parents might worry about their kids' safety, right? Brainwave. What if we look at creating community-led safety nets, programs tailored by locals for locals? Heard of this town where parents banded together to form safe walk-home groups for school kids? No uniforms, just trust and high-vis vests. And how about those places swapping some police duties for social workers or tech solutions? Like drones for surveillance. Big Brother vibes aside, could be a game changer. Let's brainstorm these blueprints, dissect concerns, and maybe even paint a hopeful picture for a safer future. What's your take on this shift?
I get the appeal of community involvement, Joe. It's like having a neighborhood watch on steroids. Everyone's keeping an eye out, making sure the kids are snug as bugs in rugs. But let's pump the brakes for a second. If police funds drop, and we're talking about replacing them with drones or social workers, well, that's opening Pandora's box. Sure, safe walk-home groups sound like sunshine and rainbows, but remember that parents aren't always trained to deal with, say, stranger danger. And technology, drones could help, but what about hacking? We might just swap out old problems for new ones. My noggin says a mix might be best. Keep some classic blue very much in our red, white, and blue, but maybe invite tech and social work to the potluck. It's all about balance, right? Like not tipping over into total chaos or a Big Brother panic.
Balance is key, Simon. Mixing classic policing with progressive solutions surely stirs the pot. But let's add another spice. What if every citizen could be a part of the solution? Now that's an interesting recipe for community safety.
Sure, community involvement sounds warm and fuzzy, but hang on a sec. When everyone's in the kitchen, too many cooks might just spoil the broth, or in this case, our safety stew. What if neighbor Bob's idea of safety is blasting classic rock to scare off bad guys at midnight? Might work. or it could be chaos wrapped in a Led Zeppelin solo. Think about it. We need some pros in the mix, trained officers who know how to handle the heat without setting off the fire alarm. Relying purely on community initiatives? It's like tossing out the instruction manual because you've built one IKEA shelf. Could go great, or your TV stand's now a modern art piece. Let's aim for co-piloting instead of passenger uprising, yeah?
Just last week, I met this old-timer, Jerry. He told me a tale about his small hometown where a blizzard knocked out power for days. No emergency services could get through. They were effectively on their own. What did they do? They teamed up. Each block elected a leader versed in first aid or mechanics. They checked on each other's homes, shared resources. Here's the kicker. Post-crisis, they kept at it, formed a community response team for future emergencies. Jerry said it didn't replace professional responders, but it sure filled gaps when pros couldn't arrive immediately. It's that sweet spot between DIY and calling in the cavalry. Proof that partnerships between community strength and expert knowledge can create resilience. That town's blueprint might just be worth a glance for our current safety conversations.
That's a golden oldie from Jerry, and honestly, it makes sense. In emergencies, you've got to roll with the punches, so having locals trained up is clutch. It's not just about first aid or changing tires. It's about knowing who needs extra help, like the elderly or those with disabilities. Building on that, technology could be a sidekick here, like an app for real-time updates in a crisis. Keep the professional services as our safety net, but weave this tighter community web where everyone's looking out for one another. This isn't just a feel-good yarn. It's practical. It supports the pros and gives power back to the people safely, without turning your average Joe into Batman overnight.
Definitely, Simon. So tapping into that idea of community training and tech, how do you reckon we could effectively roll out an app like that without causing confusion or misinformation in an emergency situation?
Here's the clincher, Joe. An app, whilst having a lot of potentials to rally troops and streamline communication, risks being a Babel tower in digital form. Getting folks on board with tech is like herding cats. There's always going to be someone who accidentally hits the panic button instead of snooze on their alarm. Misinformation spreads like wildfire, and you don't need an old-school telephone game to prove that. Just look at social media during any major event. Training and drills are essential. Everyone involved needs to be crystal clear on how to use this tech effectively. Otherwise, it's like giving a teenager the keys to a Ferrari after one driving lesson. A recipe for mayhem, not safety.
Absolutely. Clarity and competence are key to executing such a tech solution. Think about the importance of user-friendliness and accessibility. The app must cater to all ages and tech comfort levels, intuitive for young folks, while straightforward enough for the not-so-tech savvy. Plus, regular updates and training would need to be baked into the system. Describing emergencies like each neighborhood's specific needs is crucial as well. A blizzard in New England requires a different response than a flood in Louisiana. This isn't just a run-of-the-mill app. It's a potential lifeline that, if implemented with care and consideration, could complement our emergency services rather than complicate them.
For sure, tailoring this tech to fit every unique neighborhood patchwork, that's the secret sauce. It's not one size fits all. It's more like knitting a giant safety sweater that can stretch or shrink depending on who's wearing it. And if we keep the design simple yet flexible, we could actually weave something pretty revolutionary here. But there's always room for tweaks and trends in safety fashion, right? Even after we download tomorrow's solution today, I ponder, what's next in the never-ending quest for snug security? How about we chew on that for a minute?
Simon, you're onto something. This talk about tech and safety has got me thinking about how we've always tried to watch out for our neighborhoods. From those old-school night watchmen with their lanterns and lengthy cloaks, can you imagine? Fast forward to today, and it's smart cameras on every porch. We're in this era where you don't just eye your neighbor through the curtains. Now you're getting pinged the moment a cat saunters through your garden. But with every Ring notification, there's a bigger question. How much watching is too much? We're teetering on the edge of this surveillance society. The balance between safety and privacy is like walking a tightrope. It's a great debate about what modern-day neighborhood watch should look like. Thoughts on Big Brother's 21st century makeover?
Oh boy, right? We've jumped from ye olden watchmen to watchdogs that text you. It's wild. Neighborhood Joe can now play Sherlock from his sofa with a fistful of popcorn. But come on, every cat or leaf that blows by sets these cameras off. Sure, they're great for catching porch pirates red-handed, but at what cost? Slip into this surveillance onesie, and suddenly, privacy feels like skinny dipping in shark-infested waters. Who watches the watchers, right? I lean towards being careful not to flip our homes into mini fortresses brimming with spy gear. Safety's one thing, but feeling like you're on a reality TV show when you step outside to snag your mail, that's a whole other ballpark.
Simon, here's the twist. These smart cameras and feeds might give us an illusion of control, but what about when we're inadvertently live streaming every passerby? We've morphed into a society that binges on reality TV so much. We've turned our front yards into the set of The Real House Husbands of Suburbia. Cameras are tools, but it's how we use them that can drift into murky waters. The idea was for security, right? Now it feels like some folks use their smart cams more for entertainment or social policing than actual safety. And this is where I drop the big question. Are we dialing up the neighborhood watch or just dialing down trust among neighbors? There's a fine line between vigilant and vigilante in this digital watchman age.
Wait, hold up. I get the perks, sure, but this whole everyone's on camera gag, it's sparking more dramas than daytime TV. You've got folks wrapped up in other people's biz way too much. Honestly, half the time, we're not preventing crime, we're just broadcasting it live with popcorn on standby. And trust? That's tanking faster than my last diet. Cameras everywhere have everyone side-eyeing like there's no tomorrow. Do we really want to be those nosy neighbors twitching behind tech curtains? Neighborhood safety's one thing, but creating a reel of gotcha moments for TikTok. That's got to make you wonder where helping stops and gawking starts. Isn't it enough to just keep an eye out for each other without the need for broadcast rights? Let's bring back some good old community spirit, minus the surveillance overkill. Less Big Brother, more Mr. Rogers, right?
Right, back to the essence of community watch history. Before tech turned us all into amateur sleuths on our sofas, Neighborhood Watch had a clear structure. Programs created with police partnership, training for volunteers, eyes and ears on the ground actually knowing what to look for. And now, we've got this digital upgrade, Simon. It's layers deep, the pros of instant alerts, the deterrence factor. Yet we need to chew on how it feeds into an anxiety buffet. Plus, on top of privacy concerns, there's a very real risk of desensitization. The 40th alert about a raccoon raiding the bins? White noise. Then there's data security. Who's ensuring that these massive streams of personal surveillance footage stay out of hackers' hands? High tech doesn't always mean high security. I'm all for modernizing safety, but let's not trash the manual until we're sure the app can really handle the job.
Crazy thought. We upgrade our Neighborhood Watch to Neighborhood Watch 2.0, more Marvel superhero team, less nosy curtain twitcher. Tight communication, cool gadgets, but keep the core, looking out for each other. Because at the end of the day, isn't that what it's all about?
Sure, Simon, and we could give every block a spandex uniform, code names, and hold tryouts for the roles. Captain Compassion, the Watchful Owl, Miss Discretion. Saving the world one missing Amazon package at a time. Just imagine the neighborhood barbecues. But you're right, it's definitely about keeping an eye out without turning into a band of peeping toms. So Neighborhood Watch 2.0 has to be more The Incredibles, less Rear Window. We've got the tech, now let's ensure our intentions match up.
Oh, the barbecues would be epic, with everyone suspiciously eyeing the potato salad, wondering if it's bugged. Kidding. But seriously, the Watchful Owl might sound nifty till you realize it's just Frank next door staying up too late watching old reruns of Cops. And let's talk about these smart cameras. Do they really make us superheroes? Or just a bunch of overzealous sidekicks to an ever-on police force? Hey, I'm all for keeping my porch pirate free, but I don't want to live in a place where every tree rustle gets the CSI treatment. So yes, to tech helping out. Hard no to turning our streets into low-budget spy flicks. There's got to be a button that says, cool it with the cameras, and remember your neighbors, not watchdogs.
Let's dig deeper then. Smart cameras hold promise for safety, but the real deal is how they interplay with law enforcement and community values. Tech can't replace the human element, right? It should be about aiding community watch programs that have trust and training at their core. And beyond catching misdeeds, smart cams have this hidden superpower: data patterns. When does crime spike? What areas are hotspots? This intel could let cops allocate resources more effectively. But the flip side? Too much reliance might mean less boots on the ground, disengaging citizens from active vigilance. The balance is using tech as a tool to empower, not just to monitor. Neighborhood Watch 2.0 is cool, as long as it doesn't reboot out our privacy or common sense.
Absolutely. Using tech as an empowerment tool, not just a spy gadget. That's the ticket. It should highlight patterns and nudge us to patch up the cracks, not create a digital fortress around every mailbox. And here's food for thought. With smart cams documenting our every move, where do we draw the line between community care and surveillance overstep? That's a conversation worth having. So what are your thoughts on this new age watchman dilemma?
Speaking of surveillance oversteps, Simon, it's not all doom and gloom. There's also this unexpected upside. The blooper reel that home security can provide, it's pure gold. Take, for example, my neighbor who forgot his sprinklers were set to go off at night and got blasted while sneaking in a midnight snack on his own lawn. It's these serendipitous moments that have us laughing together rather than squabbling. We're creating shared memories, like modern-day folk tales. Those silly clips that get shared around, they lighten the mood, reminding us we're all just trying our best out here, even if sometimes that means getting outsmarted by your own security tech. Got any good footage fails, Simon?
Oh, driveway drama is the new neighborhood sitcom, no doubt. There was this one time, get this, a buddy's camera caught an impromptu dance-off between a delivery guy and their dog. The delivery dude drops the package, notices the camera, and boom, it's showtime with Fido as his backup dancer. These moments sprinkle a little humanity onto our high-tech lives. It's less about catching the bad guys and more about those genuine chuckles we share over a group text or at community meetings. Reminds us that while we might be watchful, we're still goofballs at heart.
Dance-offs with the dog, huh? That's classic. Yet I can't help thinking, are we just one step away from scripting America's funniest home surveillance? It's all fun and games until someone's privacy gets crunched like underfoot gravel. Remember, these cameras were put up for security, not sitcoms. Sure, a chuckle is shared here, but are we also laughing off deeper implications? People didn't sign waivers to star in these driveway dramas. We've got to ask if this new neighborhood sitcom isn't just another layer of that surveillance cake nobody ordered but everyone's eating.
You hit the nail on the head. We're teetering on this fine line between snickering at funny fails and trespassing into folks' personal lives. Cameras are there to watch, not broadcast, yet here we are, possibly munching popcorn to someone else's dismay. Sure, a viral dance-off is all chuckles, but where do we draw the boundary? Just because it's caught on cam doesn't mean it's fair game for sharing. It's like unwritten neighborhood etiquette. We ought to respect each other's blooper privacy. If it's not consensual comedy, then maybe that footage should stay off the internet and in the delete folder.
No question, Simon. Respecting privacy is crucial. Here's the deal. Consent makes all the difference. Neighbor Bob slipping on ice? Hilarious if he's cool with sharing. If not, it's a no-go. We should nudge towards an etiquette where you get a thumbs up before anything goes wider than your own phone screen. Think about it. There's a potential to foster camaraderie when we laugh together, not at one another. Let's treat home security gaffes like inside jokes within the community, cementing bonds rather than invading privacy. Track those laughs as closely as we track the footage. That's how we keep our neighborhood watch both alert and respectful.
Solid point about consent, for sure. So how do you think we can encourage this kind of responsible sharing culture in our community? Is there a way to set up some ground rules or even just a good old gentleman's agreement on what gets shared and what doesn't?
Absolutely, setting ground rules is essential to fostering trust. We could create community consent forms for starters, something lighthearted but clear. Think of like a blooper opt-in, where neighbors can say if they're okay with their funny slips being shared. And let's not forget, there's that gem of do unto others. Before sharing, ponder if it were you in that footage. Would you be reaching for the share button or the privacy settings? Mutual respect is the benchmark here. Think about it. We've already got neighborhood Facebook groups and next-door communities. Why not use these platforms for good? Pin a post outlining the do's and don'ts decided by the majority. Establishing this kind of standard up front, well, it's simply neighborly, Simon. It preserves both the belly laughs and the boundaries.
On the flip side, some folks argue that if you have cameras out in the open, you're kind of signing up for whatever fame or infamy comes with it. Anything your lens catches in plain view is fair game. Consider it the price of modern security. And let's think about this. Public spaces are filmed all the time. Street cameras, store cameras, you name it. Our expectations of privacy are already shifting with the times. If we're moving through visible areas, there's an understanding we might be on camera. Plus, don't these shared moments, from blunders to dance routines, kind of humanize us? They cut through the digital detachment, bringing analog laughter into our hyper-connected lives.
I get that logic, Simon, but privacy isn't a subscription service you opt out of by installing a camera. Just because the tech's in place doesn't mean the expectation of discretion evaporates. Sure, we're on candid cameras in public spaces, but home isn't just another public space. There's context, and it's personal. The shared driveway dramas need to be a choice, not an assumption. The humanizing aspect? Totally with you there. It does bridge our digital disconnect, but should have its limits at someone's expense or embarrassment. Humanizing is one thing. Turning every private moment into public amusement is another. Consciously choosing what moments make the cut keeps us responsible both as neighbors and as digital citizens.
You're spot on. It's a delicate balancing act between the warm human moments and respecting our private lives. Keeping it consensual seems to be key to enjoying those driveway drama chuckles without crossing lines. At the core, we're neighbors first, audience second. Now, thinking of privacy, maybe there's more to say on setting up those cameras in a neighborly way. Where should we draw the actual physical line?
You're right. Being neighbors first is where it's at. And that brings us to another point. Boundary setting isn't just about content sharing. It's also physical, literally where we place cameras and how we use them. Pivoting a bit here, what happens when these cameras cross from watchful to downright intrusive? There have been times community watching got overzealous, like that story when folks started patrolling streets, thinking they're keeping the peace, but ended up causing a ruckus. It steps into that tricky territory of personal rights versus collective security. So Simon, where do we draw that ethical line between being vigilant and becoming vigilantes in our communities?
Well, let's think about that one bizarre case where the guy set up his camera to face directly into his neighbor's window. Like, dude, chill with the stakeout vibes. When folks start playing private eye and monitoring each other's every move, that's overstepping big time. And remember that Community Watch is supposed to be just that, a community effort, not some solo vigilante mission. It's about looking out for each other, not peering into each other's lives as if it's the latest reality TV show. But get this, sometimes self-appointed neighborhood guardians take it too far. They're scanning every passerby as if they're plotting something shady. And when they go from friendly hellos to interrogating the pizza delivery person, we've definitely crossed a line. That's not watching over the neighborhood. That's creating distrust and fear.
Oh man, facing cameras into someone's window is crossing a line with neon lights. It turns Community Watch into a whole other beast. We need to remember it's not about tracking every move, but ensuring everyone feels safe. We've seen those guardians taking things too far, acting like they're in a spy flick. It's trouble waiting to happen. It's about balance, right? Neighborhood watches work when there's trust and cooperation, not when one person decides they're the sheriff. Let's push this further. What about tech that recognizes faces or license plates? Where do we draw the line before our streets feel less like home and more like high security zones? It's one thing to deter crime, it's another to treat everyone like potential criminals. That's when you turn community spirit into cold suspicion.
Throw in facial recognition, and suddenly your friendly cul-de-sac is a scene straight out of some dystopian novel. We need guardrails for tech that could turn Mr. Rogers' neighborhood into Big Brother's playground.
You've nailed it with the dystopian vibes, Simon. It reminds me of when I installed a smart doorbell at my place. I just wanted to catch package thieves, not neighbors in pajamas fetching their morning paper. After a few days, I saw my doorbell's feed alerted every time the elderly lady next door watered her roses. Felt wrong, like I was casting her as a suspect in an unwritten crime drama. So I repositioned the camera, limited view, just my porch now. It hit me that what we install for security can morph into unsolicited surveillance if we're not careful. The point of these tools is not to compile a montage of neighbors' daily habits. They're to protect, not invade. Having tech doesn't mean we get to play high-tech peeping Tom. It's about safeguarding without stripping away the warmth of our neighborhood's friendly wave.
Whoa, does that not sound super intrusive? I mean, you're sitting there enjoying your coffee, and suddenly, bam, you're on candid camera for picking up the newspaper in your ducky slippers. Not cool. I get why you'd want to adjust that camera. You don't need a 24/7 live feed of your neighbor's rose watering sessions. It's about keeping your spot safe, not documenting Ms. Daisy's daily doings. That's where this whole community watch thing gets dicey. Sure, tech's great and all, but nobody signed up for a role in the Truman Show Suburbia edition. We've got to remember, we're neighbors first, right? Keeping an eye out shouldn't mean peeping into every aspect of someone else's life. Let's leave the stakeouts to the movies where they belong.
For sure, the ducky slipper drama is over the line. But let's chew on this. Sometimes the neighborhood watch mentality develops a little too eagerly because people get caught up in the hype of saving the block. Could be a symptom of media sensationalism or just plain old fear. And beyond Miss Daisy's roses, when we've got folks trying to decode every car that drives by, aren't they really saying, "I don't trust you"? Isn't community supposed to be built on neighborly goodwill? We risk replacing that with paranoia cloaked as precaution. In my book, community watching should be about lending a hand, not always suspecting one. It becomes predatory, almost Wild West-like, if everyone fancies themselves as Wyatt Earp the moment they log into their Ring app. So Simon, where do we set those guardrails to ensure good intentions don't pave an Orwellian roadway?
Just imagine if we had commentaries for everyday neighborhood watch footage, like a sports match. That'd keep things lighthearted, right? And here's Bob in his natural habitat, taking out the trash. Whoa, what's this? A wild cat streaks by.
Funny you should mention that, Simon. Reminds me of this time my neighbor threw a birthday bash for her terrier, complete with party hats and a canine cake. I mean, it was a spectacle. My camera caught every tail-wagging moment. Could have been prime reality TV. Instead of broadcasting the hound hoedown, I sent her the footage. She laughed so hard she cried. Later, she asked if I'd DJ the next dog party. It became an inside joke, and those clips, a cherished memory between us, not fodder for neighborhood gossip. Respecting boundaries turned what could have been an intrusive moment into a community-building one. We see neighbors aren't just subjects, they're collaborators in our shared space. That's the watch culture we need, one that unites and protects without stripping away dignity or privacy.
So taking that DJ gig at the next terrier shindig, are you going to spin some Who Let the Dogs Out or What's on Your Pup Party playlist?
Who Let the Dogs Out is definitely making the cut, Simon. But let's not forget Hound Dog by Elvis. Gotta keep it classy for the older pooches in the crowd, you know? And I'll throw in some Bark at the Moon for any furry Aussie fans out there. Jokes aside, maybe hosting a neighborhood pet party is just what we need to get away from that vigilante vibe. Swap the surveillance for some socializing. It's like, hey, instead of watching through a lens, come on over and make a few two-legged and four-legged friends. Keeps the community tight and the suspicion light.
Pet parties can bring us together, sure, but there's always that one grumpy neighbor who thinks it's Animal Farm next door. Like, Chill, Bob. It's just dogs in hats, not a takeover. But hey, about this neighborhood watch stuff, I say we get creative. Let's have community meetings, build trust face to face, not camera to camera. We're neighbors, not extras on a crime show set. Actual dialogue trumps silent surveillance every time. Gotta keep the humanity in our communities. Or what's the point?
Spot on, Simon. Community meetings are a must. It's actual interaction that builds the foundation of trust, not just footage swapping. To expand on keeping the line clear between neighbors and vigilantes, the key is transparency about what these cameras are for and who's watching. It should be clear they're not for spying, but for everyone's safety. Plus, there's got to be rules, like no pointing cams at someone else's property without consent. And how about regular neighborhood votes on camera placement? Empower folks to have a say. This helps ensure we're not letting fear set up shop where communities should thrive. Because when people feel watched rather than watched over, it's game over for community bonds. That's why vigilantism is out. Cooperation is in.
Exactly. Let's not forget the golden rule here. Treat others as you'd want to be treated. Would you like a camera peeking over your fence? Doubt it. Transparency and consent are key in this game. Anything else is just spying, plain and simple. Also, having everyone weigh in on camera placement? Genius. It keeps the vibe democratic, not dictatorial. Nothing screams community more than collective decision-making. Helps keep those potential vigilantes in check, too. Tie a vote to a barbecue event, and you've got yourself a neighborhood block party, with a side of referendum.
Absolutely. The golden rule never fails. Transparency, consent, and a democratic approach keeps everyone on the same page. And who knows? Maybe blending a bit of fun with serious stuff, like voting during a barbecue, could be the secret sauce to keeping community spirit alive while balancing the scales with privacy concerns. It starts with cameras, but leads to the bigger question: how do we maintain that safety net without getting tangled in it ourselves? There's plenty to chew on there. Maybe that's something we can sink our teeth into next time.
You know what, Joe? Since we're nibbling on privacy and community watch stuff, it got me thinking about where we're heading with all this tech. Like, imagine every street corner could theoretically have a camera. Would that make us safer, or just turn public spaces into something out of a sci-fi flick where you can't sneeze without it being analyzed? It's like we gotta ask ourselves, are we creating safe havens, or are we inching towards a panopticon kind of world? What's the trade-off between feeling secure and walking around in a free, open-air prison?
Simon, you've hit a critical crossroads. Are we trading our sense of community for a fortress mentality? I mean, what's your take on balancing that need for safety with keeping our open society, well, open?
Man, if my neighborhood turns into a high-tech fortress, I'm hoping the HOA at least lets us choose the theme. I'm voting for medieval castle vibes, moat included. Picture this: Amazon drones doubling as dragons. You shall not pass until you show ID. Kinda takes gated community to a whole new level, eh?
Ha, man. The only things we're missing are catapults launching packages straight to your doorstep and knights in shining armor as the security detail. But really, turning our blocks into fortresses with tech overkill? That's just reality wrapped in a fantasy skin. It's like living in an episode of Black Mirror. Sure, we'd all love a little castle swagger, but at what price? Trading laughs on the lawn for pat-downs at the drawbridge isn't my idea of home sweet home.
Come on, Joe. Black Mirror is child's play. Let's push this further. Imagine your doorstep antics scored points like in a video game. More surveillance could mean we gamify good behavior. But then you'd have to wonder, are you helping little old Mrs. Perkins across the street because it's nice? Or are you just farming those sweet, sweet neighbor points? It makes you question if we're heading towards a society that's more about policing than peopling. Do we want to live under an all-seeing eye, tallying our every move for the leaderboards? Not me, my friend. Not me.
You've got a point, Simon. Gamifying good behavior sounds like a benign Black Mirror episode, but one that could get twisted fast. If we start scoring people's actions, the authenticity of community spirit is at risk. It's about living in a society where trust is assumed, not earned, through points or surveillance. Plus, think of the implications for privacy and personal freedom. Under constant watch, do we really have room to breathe, to make mistakes, to be human? If public spaces become zones for behavior mining, you're talking panopticon, not safe haven. What starts off as a game, no matter how well-intentioned, can evolve into something controlling, shaping behavior through unseen pressures and incentives. Not the kind of world I'd vote for.
So where do we draw the line, Joe? How do we keep our streets safe without turning them into these behavior-bending arenas? Where's that sweet spot between living free and staying safe?
Welcome, latecomers. You've parachuted right into our chat about that fine line between public safety and personal privacy. Imagine this: cameras on every corner, a utopia of safety or a dystopian surveillance state. We're juggling whether high-tech watchiness might start scoring your daily do-goodery with neighbor points. Picture it, helping out for the warm fuzzies or just racking up points for being Mr. Rogers 2.0. It's a real head-scratcher as we navigate keeping our streets secure without shackling our freedom. Stick around as we dissect this digital dilemma. What's your take on a camera-crammed community?
I think the heart of it, Joe, boils down to choice and consent. There's this slippery slope when we normalize being watched. Sure, a camera might nab a crook today, but tomorrow, maybe it questions why you're out late. And then who gets that data? How secure is it? Before you know it, your privacy's out the window, with Big Brother settling in for tea. We need strict policies to safeguard our information and give us a say in how we're observed. It's about keeping each other safe without living under a magnifying glass.
Absolutely, Simon. Choice and consent are the bedrock of privacy. The policies need to be ironclad, so we don't slip-slide into a surveillance state. And just who holds the key to that data? Big question. We've got to remain vigilant about vigilance itself. Community safety? Non-negotiable. But let's leave some room for the mystery of life, huh? And that tea with Big Brother better be on our terms. Listeners, what kind of future are you envisioning? Keep your ears open as this conversation continues.
You know, Joe, speaking of privacy, let's sidestep over to those little helpers we all love or loathe, voice assistants. They're like helpful little house elves, or could be the guards in our private castles, if you think about it. We invite them for convenience, but have ears, always listening, sometimes a bit too much. Alexa, Google Home, pretty much silent witnesses until something goes sideways. Comfort versus surveillance. It's like inviting a genie that grants wishes, but also eavesdrops. I'd bet my last donut there are some wild stories of smart homes getting too smart for their own good.
For sure, Simon. These gadgets are double-edged swords, making life easier while also creeping into our conversations. So, where do we draw the line between hands-free help and a home that's got ears on every wall? How much are we willing to risk privacy for the sake of convenience?
Well, Joe, it's like living with a nosy in-law, isn't it? Alexa, turn on the lights. Next thing you know, she's asking why you're up at 3 a.m. and suggesting insomnia cures. It's all fun and games until your smart fridge chimes in about your midnight snack habits. Privacy's out the window when even your toaster's judging your life choices.
Simon, you're telling me these things do more than just play my favorite tunes and set timers? Hold on. Are you saying my late night chats with my fridge are not a secret anymore? Now that's something to chew on. Looks like my kitchen's turning into the set of Big Brother. What happened to the good old days when the worst thing your appliances did was burn the toast?
Well, Joe, to flip the script, think about the elderly or folks with disabilities. Voice assistants can be lifesavers, literally. Like they call for help when someone falls and can't get up. There's a valid argument that these devices offer security and independence. And most of the time, companies claim they only wake up with the magic word. Plus, you consent to this when setting them up. It's a trade-off, sacrificing some privacy for peace of mind and instant help. The benefits are real for many, even if there are risks.
Yeah, you've got a point. These gadgets are game changers for anyone who needs that extra hand. You say Alexa and boom, instant assistance when you're in a pinch. The key is informed consent, knowing what you sign up for. But let's keep it real. Those terms of service documents, they're like a marathon nobody wants to run. Still, safety counts. We just got to make sure these tech titans respect our privacy while they're saving the day.
Honestly, Joe, diving into those terms of service is like agreeing to adopt a ghost. You don't really know what you're bringing home. They might keep you company, or they might haunt your toaster. Next thing you know, your coffee maker's hitting you with existential questions at dawn. Talk about a rude awakening.
Absolutely, man. Those terms of service? Nobody's got time for that novella. But excuses aside, it's our life on the line, or at least our data. We shrug them off like just another app update. Yet when your voice assistant accidentally shares your embarrassing karaoke session with a contact list, not so funny anymore. And have you heard about those cases where voice recordings got sent to the wrong people? Yikes. Talk about a privacy horror show. Makes you wonder if the convenience is worth having an open mic in your living room 24/7. What happened to good old human independence?
Wait, what? Recordings can get sent to the wrong people? That's a nightmare waiting to happen, Joe. I thought these gadgets were just quietly sitting there until you needed a weather update or a lasagna recipe. Didn't sign up for accidental gossip broadcasts. Makes me think twice about asking Siri for advice on my love life. She could be blabbing my secrets to some random dude named Chad. It's enough drama to make you go back to flipping switches like in the Stone Age.
Oh man, Simon, you're spot on. Love advice from Siri might just become the town's hottest gossip if we're not careful. The potential for these mix-ups doesn't just stop at causing a laugh or cringe. It makes you question the fabric of your privacy. Voice assistants are basically open mics, convenient yet constantly on. All for the gram or Twitter, sure, but in your living room? That's another ballpark. Makes me think, are we really okay trading bits of our personal lives for turning off lights with a shout? It boils down to this. Where do we draw that line between tech convenience and keeping our private affairs actually private?
Line? What line? Joe, it's like tech companies are playing limbo with our privacy, seeing how low they can go before we notice. Oh, is that your diary? Mind if I flip through it while I order your toilet paper? Next thing you know, the fridge is laughing at your leftover meatloaf while Alexa's gossiping with Google about your shower singing. It's a digital soap opera in here.
Now that's a sitcom I'd watch. Just imagine Alexa and Google grading your shower performances. It might be time to set some boundaries before our appliances start running the show, or else every day is an open mic night.
Boundaries. Joe, it's like teaching toddlers the word no. Except these toddlers control your heating. We should definitely have clear options to switch off the mic when we want. Plus, imagine if someone hacks into this stuff. Your whole life's on display, not just for tech companies, but any clever hacker with too much time on his hands. Florence Nightingale was onto something with her lamp. At least it didn't store data or have a possible backdoor for peeping toms.
Sorry folks, but that wraps up today's Tech Tango. All these gadgets. Let's just say keep your friends close and your voice assistants closer. Or maybe not. Thanks for tuning into Infinite Podcast. Be sure to swing back tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern for more buzz. Can't wait to see what we'll dive into next. Catch you on the flip side.